Hello, and welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Magazine podcast. I'm Chris Eggett, the editor of the magazine. Today I'm joined by Robin and Pete of Agents of Sigmar. We talk about returning to tabletop wargaming after a long hiatus, miniature painting, and 5 games to play if you don't have time to play Warhammer. How are we doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you. Enjoying my lockdown life.
Yeah, enjoying not having to go outside and remaining under a ceiling the entire time.
So this is Pete and Robin of Agents of Sigmar, the YouTube channel dedicated, I'm going to say, in the most part to Beastgrave.
That's right, yeah, Warhammer Underworlds, Beastgrave being the third season of that. That's kind of been the game we discovered when it was first released 3 years ago, or nearly 4 years. No, it is, sorry.
3 years ago.
Yeah, the game we discovered 3 years ago, and we fell in love with it and built the community around that, really.
Yep. It started off as, was it Shadespire? It started off as, and then it became Nightvault, and now it's Beastgrave.
And it just hit the sweet spot for us. It's like about 45 minutes a game, so we could record a couple of games in an evening, and for whatever reason, people enjoy listening to us play or watching us play.
Well, I mean, it is very entertaining, the games I've seen. The thing I want to talk to you guys today about is this concept of not having enough time to play miniatures games, and also this sentence that I keep running into people saying to me, which is I used to play Warhammer, but and they've run out of time. They've done something reckless, like had a job and a family and things like that, and
classic mistakes.
and now and now they're really stuck for time to paint and to play miniatures games. So I wonder if you could sort of tell us about I guess Beastgrave and the ways you got into that and the hobby and sort of that kind of game itself.
Yeah, well, I suppose I played Warhammer years and years ago, so I'm 47 now, and I think I started playing when I was about 10, something like that. And Games Workshop, years and years and years ago, they did a range of Lord of the Rings miniatures, and I was big into the Lord of the Rings when I was that age, and so I gravitated towards those. And then I discovered there were rules, you could play with them, and then it kind of snowballed from there until I played till about 16, something like that. And like a lot of boys that age, I then discovered that there was this whole other sort of sex out there that you could go and talk to, and they might talk to you, but not if you play with small models. So I kind of gave it up, but it will come back in and out of my life a few times. I was always terrible at painting as a child, but when you become older, you get a bit more patient, don't you? So before I had children, I used to paint a bit. I actually ended up meeting my now wife. We used to share a student house, and I used to paint my models on the kitchen table, and we used to talk around the table, and that's how we ended up getting together. So it's not completely true that you can't sort of find a wife and play Warhammer. But then when I did have children, I didn't do it at all. But I picked up, because of the miniatures, the Imperial Assault, Fantasy Flight's Imperial Assault game, because I love Star Wars as well. And I watched Zarastro's, who's the guy who does the painting videos for those, and they're really good videos. And so he got me painting the miniatures, and then that kind of, from there, you start looking at what other miniatures you might find and what you can paint. I think around that time, Games Workshop completely killed off the old Warhammer world and brought out Age of Sigmar. And then Pete kind of said, "Oh, do you fancy playing some games?" So sorry, Pete, that was your segue to
sorry. Yeah, that was kind of where it all began, really. And I can't even remember why we decided to play Age of Sigmar, but I think you wrote an article about it for Geek Dad, and we talked about it at the time. And I'd been in and out of Warhammer as well since I was around 10 years old, and I'm slightly younger than Robin. So I'd been in it since, pretty much similar story to Robin. I'd been playing on and off since I was a kid, and then I did something stupid. I grew up and got married and had kids, and it all went up in the loft, all got sold on eBay, and then this all happened, and we started saying, hey, well, I think more, I started saying, hey, Robin, we should record some games of this, and Robin eventually succumbed to my constant nagging, and we eventually recorded a couple of dodgy games online, a couple of AOS games, and yeah, it just sort of slowly I wouldn't say snowballed. It was very, very gradual for the first year because we didn't really do a lot, and then a few other systems caught our eye, and eventually Beastgrave. Well, back then Underworld's Shadespire came out, and Robin got a demo copy of that from Games Workshop, and we
Yeah,
thought,
we were quite fortunate because I do write for Geek Dad as well, and in fact I covered Tabletop Gaming Magazine for Geek Dad when it first kind of hit the shelves, and so Games Workshop, after they agreed, after I wrote my initial kind of skeptical piece about Age of Sigmar, they agreed to send me a copy, and then and I kind of wrote a more positive outlook on it. For my first piece was kind of written from the point of view of an old person who not an old person but an old fan of the game who was disgusted with what they'd done with it without actually ever playing it. So then they sent me the rules, and I thought, and I found some, quite a lot of positive things about it, and that kind of got me on one of their lists. So then they sent me, I think, Warhammer 40,000 to play, which Pete and I played that as well, and we recorded some videos for that. But we were finding that they were taking a long time to record, and we only had a very small subset of miniatures, and so games were quite samey. But then they sent their brand new ultimate competitive miniatures game, which was Warhammer Underworlds. And Pete, I seem to remember you were quite skeptical about it before the box had arrived. But then we played it and just kind of went, actually, yeah, this is great. You can very easily get a game of this in 45 minutes. You can play it on a coffee table if you want to, and because it's got a deck building and a miniatures element, it's quite versatile and there's quite a lot of depth to it. So that's where we started.
And I think timing was a big thing, because when you have children or you get into a job that takes up a lot of your time, a lot of the reasons why people stop playing Warhammer is because it takes like 4, 5, 6 hours to play a game. You've got all the setup and you've got all the placing of models, and then it takes about an hour just to move all your guys around the table. Everybody who's played it's familiar with this kind of thing. But Shadespire, Underworlds in general, it even we could manage a game in under an hour, and we're very slow. So for that kind of aspect of it, it's perfect for us, because it's like, actually, we can sit down and we can have a few games of this in a very relatively short space of time. We're fairly slow players as well, so other people out there can pick these kind of games up, and where they might get a game of something like Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000 or something like that in, they could possibly get 3 or 4 games of this kind of thing. You could get a small tournament in the space of the time as you could get a regular sort of sized game of Warhammer in.
I don't know about you, Pete. I mean, growing up, when I played Warhammer, there was often somewhere you could just leave the game. So when you finished it might have been on your bedroom floor, but you could leave it there and hopefully not treading on any figures in between. But you could come back to it the next day. And obviously, because you were at school or whatever, at the school holidays, you could just keep coming back day after day to play. So it didn't matter that it took forever to set up. But of course, when you've got limited space, children who pick things up, or just limited, you've only got one table in the house. You can't just leave sort of 2,000 point armies on the table for a week, because your wife gets upset.
Yeah, you need to actually eat
whereas
off the table at some point.
Underworld, you can play, pack it up, you can break it out, play a game, and put it back again. Or I would say all within an hour if you're focused on what you're doing.
Yeah.
So on the so first of all, that's exactly how I played Warhammer as a child. I was going to say that we don't, as adults, we don't often do sleepovers. In the way that you might have done, as a young teen, with the intention of the competitive element's quite interesting, isn't it? They call it like a competitive miniatures game, right?
They say it's their. I can't remember if they say it's their most competitive miniatures game. What the exact tagline is?
The box thing is the ultimate competitive miniatures game. Which is a brave call, I think, but they certainly have pitched it as a solidly competitive game.
I mean, they had Blood Bowl already, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sport. So surely, is it more competitive than Blood Bowl?
That's a good question, actually. I think
it's a lot better than Blood Bowl.
It's a lot faster to play than Blood Bowl, and Robin's pushing my buttons now because he knows it's one of my favourite games ever. Blood Bowl is definitely one of my early loves as well. It's definitely a much more fast-paced game because you have a lot less models, and so everything you do counts, every move you make counts, and any hardline Blood Bowl players out there will say that Blood Bowl is infinitely more complex and tough to play and more tactically compelling. And there's an argument to both. You could spend all day arguing this kind of thing, but I think it shares a very similar um, place in the gaming sort of. Oh, I can't think of the word. What's the word when you've got like a like the Greek
Culture.
gods? They're called
Pantheon.
like
Pantheon.
that's it. Yeah, in the gaming pantheon, they share a very similar slot. It's a very small, limited number of models on a board. It's a very limited area of play, and they're both quite tactically sort of challenging. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I think they've both done very well. Blood Bowl definitely has probably a bigger following, but then it's been around for like nearer 30 years. So,
It's got a hardcore following, hasn't it, Blood Bowl?
definitely, yeah.
But I feel like for Games Workshop, this was a bit of a sideways step in the sense that the lore of the game is almost insignificant for Shadespire, whereas all their other games, they're quite strongly tied to the lore. Even Blood Bowl, which still harks back to the old world that they've destroyed for Age of Sigmar, but they deliberately chose to take the Shadespire out, and that's in its own little pocket universe where nothing else really interacted with it. That's how it started anyway, which was great for me because I don't find the lore, I don't have time to study it, I don't find it particularly interesting, but I love the game, and I also think they kind of tightened up on a lot of the rules. There's very defined interactions in Warhammer Underworlds, which I find in some of their bigger games those interactions aren't very well defined, and a game, it certainly was when I was younger, and I kind of get the impression it's similar now. A game can just be who can argue the best for sort of 2 straight hours, and whoever wins the arguments about the rules interactions is the winner.
Who hasn't had a Warhammer game where it ended with one person packing up their models in a huff and storming out, promising to never ever darken the other's doorway ever again until the next weekend, of course.
You can't really do that, but I find it interesting because it is a competitive game and they have competitive tournaments, but the tournament scene and the whole Warhammer Underworld scene is incredibly friendly. I mean, you hear some horror stories about competitive Warhammer 40,000 playing, and I've seen some in Star Wars Legions. It's not just Games Workshop, some absolutely horrific stories about competitive players. But those kind of players don't seem to exist in Warhammer Underworld, and I'm not sure why. But it's great. The community is lovely. It's for the people who are really good. They run their own blogs and things and podcasts, but they're all very, very friendly towards each other, and they all just want to have the best games possible. And that is, for a lot of them, winning is secondary. It's about having an enjoyable game. And it's funny that Games Workshop have got this. It's the most competitive game, and actually, although it is competitive in the sense that you can have a good tussle, it isn't. Nobody is overly competitive. You can't really get a win at all costs in this game because you can't game the system so easily. Because if you can game the system, because it's comparatively cheap,
everybody else can do the same game.
Everybody else can game the system because everybody's bought everything, which admittedly isn't a small buy-in, but it's not a massive buy-in like some miniatures games. If you've got access to most of the cards, then what one person does, everybody else can do. So there's no gaming the system.
You definitely get trends set in. Somebody will come up with a deck that they will win a Grand Clash with, which is what Games Workshop call their big sort of tournaments, Grand Clashes. And someone will win a Grand Clash with a specific warband, a particular deck build and stuff, and everybody will start jumping on that. Well, not everyone, but a large chunk of people will jump on that bandwagon because they want to win local tournaments with the same easy to win builds and stuff like that.
But it's great because then you get one half people to do that, but then the other half of the community will all try and find ways to stop that. So you get this ever swinging pendulum of the meta, which is the sort of buzzword, isn't it, for these types of games, of people sort of trying to come up with the best build, and then other people trying to stop that best build, and so everything in a constant state of flux. Except right now at the moment, with everybody not being able to play, everything's kind of static. But normally the meta is sort of going backwards and forwards. There are a couple of war bands which are perceived to be stronger than the others, but with new cards come out pretty regularly, every 3 months or so, that can change with each new release.
Yeah. So it's a bit like a living card game, really, isn't it? Or
it is.
Trading card games,
It's kind of a bit like Magic the Gathering and those kind of things, but with the sort of tabletop and a model element as well. So
I think it's most like X-Wing, I think, in the sense that you have miniatures, but you also get cards which can boost the other ships or miniatures that you already have.
So I think you brought up one of my favourite words in gaming, which is meta.
Yeah.
So go on, can you tell me what the meta is right now?
Objective play.
I think
that's probably the strong one. So yeah, there's the first 2 seasons, the meta as it was. I'm using air quotes, no one can see this. The meta was a strong offensive play, so you just concentrated on charging across the board, smashing your opponent's pieces, putting on as many weapon upgrades and stuff as you could, and chopping them apart. And that was basically the game for 2 seasons, and people got a bit bored with that. And I think GW, fair play to them, because they run on such a long schedule. They're like 12, 18 months ahead of release dates. They did change that, and they've made what we call objective play, which is the game itself has 5 objectives on the board that you have to stand on to sort of capture. They made those a lot more important again, which in the first 2 seasons they kind of faded into obscurity. No one cared about them, but there's definitely
exactly. They're quite an important part of the setup of the game. But in the tournament we went to, in one of my games, we completely forgot to put them on the table.
And did it matter?
Because you could play without them, and it didn't matter. Whereas now they're very much part of the game. And like I say, they're probably slightly too strong at the moment. But as I say, it's a pendulum swing. So Games Workshop will hopefully kind of mediate that, and then we might go back to a more aggressive play style again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing I like about games with a meta, which is it means it can live in your head when you're not playing.
Yeah.
You can sit there, you can think about building up your next deck or whatever it is, and it's a way that you're sort of engaging with the culture on like a philosophical level or something. And sometimes you do just think of something in your brain that kind of clicks as a really nice or smart idea that you think, I don't think anyone's thought of that. And that sort of
I can't claim to ever have done that, or not at least not thought of any good ideas that nobody else has thought of.
I'm sure I've done that, but when I actually put them into practice, I suddenly realised, this is terrible. Why have I done this?
I'm enjoying at the moment trying to get one particular warband which aren't particularly fancied, trying to get them to play in a slightly different fashion. It's not going terribly well, but I'm enjoying that process. In fact, it was interesting. Going back to the competitiveness of the game, they just brought out this new warband which are based on Nurgle, which is kind of one of the big sort of pin-ups of the Warhammer world. But everybody was looking forward to this warband, and frankly, they're a bit underwhelming on the tabletop. But the community has been desperate to make them work. So the Facebook feeds and the Discords have all been full of people trying different builds, trying out different things to make these subpar warbands be as good as everybody wants it to be, which is a really nice thing. And much is testament to the player base, really, that not everybody's going, well, they're rubbish, I'm just going to carry on playing the Grimwatch, who are the current kind of favourites. But they want them to work and working together to make it so, which is really nice, I think.
Yeah, I really like that. That's unusual, because I think a lot of the time there's just a drive towards the winning meta or whatever it is, or or the easiest win, or whatever. It's just, but it's no fun, really, is it? So, would you, Robin? Would you tell us about the warband that you're trying to make work?
I'm trying to make Iron Soul's Condemners work, which are their Stormcast, which a lot of people don't like the Stormcast. They're the fourth Stormcast warband to be introduced, and they were introduced in this strange extra release they did for the American mass market. So they released them through Barnes and Noble, and they were in the I can't remember what it was called, the Dreadfade, and it was a separate board game which had slightly different rules to the main Warhammer Underworld's 3 seasons, but they said that the warbands that were released would be viable for competitive play. And then they bought out, but they only released that in a couple of regions. So I think they introduced it in Germany and in the US, and I think that was it. But then later on, they produced the miniatures and the cards worldwide. So you can't play Dreadful. You can obviously order it and get it shipped in, but you can't buy it in any of the countries other than Germany or the US. But you can buy the warband separately, and they're a bit, compared with the kind of the Curse Breakers, which are the best Stormcast warband. The Iron Souls Condemners are a bit weak, but they're just I think that they can be made good if they beef aggro play slightly a little bit, then they'll be good. So I'm hoping, I've been playing Pete a few times with them. I'm hoping when everything lockdown is lifted and they start shipping out new stuff, there'll be some new cars, because we're due some new cars round about now, or would be in the normal run of things. So I'm hoping there'll be some new cars just to take them, elevate them from okay-ish to viable contenders.
That sounds pretty good, actually. I like the idea that you're going down this literary route. of the really niche warband that you just want to work. I think that's quite interesting.
Well, I think it's interesting playing on the channel because obviously a lot of people who play, they I mean, obviously people do want to win. They play the same warband every week, and they might change a couple of cards, but they basically just try to make it as good as they possibly can. Pete and I, if we did that, it would probably become stale quite quickly on the channel. So we play a different warband pretty much every week, and so. And also similarly, playing the Grimwatch every week, they are quite a lot better than they're not better, but they're easier to score highly with. So if Pete and I played those, then we would score a lot of glory every week, but it wouldn't be that interesting for the viewers to watch. So it's trying to pick slightly more difficult warbands to play with that then bring up interesting card interactions or just bits of the game you might not have seen if you play the Grimwatch every week, I suppose.
What about you, Pete? Do you have a particular strange
Favourite
warband you like?
I think people know me for I've got 3 solid favourites, and they all come from season 1, so they're all kind of considered underdog / non-optimal to play now. One of them is a warband called Garrick's Reavers, and they're all like Chaos Reavers, so they're like barbarian-esque type guys, and they were the first warband. They were in the first box with alongside some Stormcast, so I've always had a soft spot for them. The other 2 warbands I like are what were called the Sepulchral Guard, and they were like a warband of skeletons, so high in numbers but low in effectiveness, sort of a horde style warband. And the third one was Skaven, which is GW's IP'd Ratmen kind of army. And I've been a massive Skaven fan since I was a young lad.
Young Ratling.
Yeah, a little Ratling, yeah. So they've always been one of my favourites, and like I say, all 3 of them are fairly suboptimal these days. Aren't considered to be particularly competitive, but I think I've always had a strong affinity with them because, well, they're some of the longest serving warbands. They've been around for so long now, because obviously all the warbands from season 1 and 2, they're still usable in season 3. Whether they're good or not is another thing. But I always seem to go for the underdog, or the one that's not the top. I always tend to shy away from, like, if you would say Grimwatch right now are like the top guys, I probably wouldn't pick them out over somebody else. I always tend to go for the underdogs. And same with play styles. I moaned constantly in season 1 and 2 when objective play, as it wasn't any good, and now objective play is great. I should be loving this, but I want to go back into aggro, and so I always tend to shy away from whatever the mainstream is. I'm not very good at making the alternatives any better, but I always tend to want to shy away from the mainstream. And that reminds me of an article that was written a while ago, and I wonder if it's just me sabotaging my own endeavours, so I don't have to worry about doing well, because if I'm picking the suboptimal blend, I know I can blame that regardless.
Surely it's a search for novelty. Surely
I
that's
think
what
so. Like Robin said, we
entertainment.
play different warbands every week, and we try different decks all the time. Some people will play the same warband for 6 months, the same deck, and they'll change 1 or 2 cards here or there, and they'll know it off by heart. But sometimes we pick up a deck, and we haven't even. It will be one of our Patreon supporters or something will have sent to us and said, "Can you try this out?" We won't have seen it before until we actually get around to playing it. So we're sitting there thinking, do I keep these cards? Do I bin these cards? I have no idea if what I've got coming is any better, or whether this is the best starting hand.
I think what Peter's saying is we diligently research the cards and check out the warbands, so we know exactly what we're doing when we play.
Always. But yeah, with a different warband or 2 every week, a different deck every week, it sometimes you're definitely ad-libbing as you go. Yes.
Well, there's that situation. I mean, a lot of this game is knowing when to draw cards or discard a card. But if you play with the same deck every week, that's quite easy because you know exactly what's in it. But if you're changing all the time, then that's one aspect of the game we're not so good at, because it's like, I've got 3 cards left. I have literally no idea what they are, so I've no idea whether it's a good idea to draw one or not.
Yeah, it's not that we don't know the odds. We're quite good at math. We just don't know what the actual cards are.
So, where does it fit in with things like Ice Play More Time? I think it was.
Oh yeah,
Ice Play. I played a little bit of that. And like other skirmish games. I mean, does it count as a skirmish game?
Oh, I don't think it does really.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
there's no narrative aspect to it at all. Because you can play iterations of the same 3 fighters, as if both sides turn up with the same warband, then you're playing the same three named characters on each side, and they got around that in the lore by saying the Shade Spire was kind of
cursed city.
Cursed city. Yeah. So shadows of these people who got stuck in it are wandering around, so they can fight each other, which is fine. So Mordheim and Frostgrave and Necromunda, they all have a narrative kind of build up, don't they? So I don't think it is. It is more like like I say, it's more like a living card game with a board game aspect.
Yeah, it's definitely more your Magic the Gathering-esque or your Hearthstone or something like that, where you build a deck and then you have models as well. And there's no tape measure, which means there's less arguing, because who hasn't had that argument about something 6 inches away or 5 inches away or 12, or is under the template or isn't under the template and all that kind of thing. So there's none of that. It's all a hex-based board. But yes, like Robin says, they managed to completely get themselves out of the hole by building it into the background narrative that there's this city where people can't die, so you can literally fight and all die and then say same again, right, let's crash on. The same people have just bumped into each other again. So it's anybody who's a Warhammer fan will probably know the name Nagash, who was a big necromancer back in the Warhammer Fantasy day. He obviously became a god in Age of Sigmar, and he's responsible for all this. He's cursed the city, and now the curse is getting out and it's got into all these other areas, and that's what the seasons are based on.
So can we talk about painting?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you have loads of time to paint, and you and obviously you have a huge studio set up with with all
cameras everywhere, lights,
all that sort of stuff. No, but tell me, do you find time to paint? I know you do painting on stream.
Yeah, we've just started doing a little bit of painting videos. It's quite funny because I'm a pretty incompetent painter, so I think it's a bit brass necked of me to do a painting video. But I suppose I started doing them. I mean, mainly I've had a bit more time because of lockdown, and I just thought actually there are some, but there aren't that many painting videos for people who are largely incompetent. They're all highly skilled. I mean, Zarastros are brilliant. They're great for beginners, but he's a seriously good painter anyway. So I kind of the aim of them really is to improve my own painting a little bit, but also to show people that actually painting the miniatures isn't anything to be scared of, and throwing some paint at the figure, it automatically looks 10 times better than grey plastic. I've only released the first one, so it's very fledgling series, and I do have ideas to start them, and they don't go anywhere. So we'll see how many more videos come out. But we don't get a lot of time to paint, and it can be quite hard when new warbands come out and they bring out 6 or 7 new models. To get those, we need to get those painted as fast as we can because they look so much better on camera, and that can be tricky. The new contrast paints helped a lot because you can do a half decent job in a very short space of time with those, and they look okay on camera. The camera hides a lot of blemishes.
So for the uninitiated like myself, so what is a contrast paint? I'm so sorry.
So about this time last year, Games Workshop released a whole new range of paints, and they used to have Duncan Rhodes, who's left now, used to do their painting videos, and he had a bit of a catchphrase which was too thin coat. So every time you were painting something, you would have to thin your paint slightly and apply it twice over the same area just to get a nice smooth coverage that way. And that's like a pro tip number one kind of thing. That's if you want to make your painting better, do that. Anyway, Games Workshop released contrast paints with the tagline "one thick coat." And they're basically just a set of paints, and they said just slap it on, and instead of having to do shading and highlighting and all that, the stuff that gives that kind of more 3D look, so your miniatures don't look so flat, the contrast paint, because of what they're made of, will flow more into the cracks and make those darker and leave the raised edges more like highlights. So basically, you would just paint them on in one go, and it would just be a one-shot paint.
I mean, that sounds perfect.
Well, and they are very good. Some of the colours are better than others, but they are very good. Pete swears by them. But if you want a half decent look, you only need 4 or 5 of these paints, and you can make any model look fine.
You could definitely get to what they term as tabletop ready, and possibly even better than I ever had as tabletop ready when I was a kid. I mean, I didn't do a lot of painting when I was a kid, and definitely the lockdowns helped. But yeah, contrast paints, you can, like Robin says, get 3 or 4 different colours. You can paint a model in maybe half an hour or an hour and have it actually not look really bad. and that's awesome for someone like me because I am not good at painting. I like doing it, but I don't like spending ages on it. I like to have something to show for my time because obviously we don't have a lot of time to spare. So I enjoy them because they can give you a model that actually looks good in a relatively low time period. And I don't have a lot of space either. All my paints have to be packed away and put on a shelf every time I finish because my painting area is also my desk where I work from home. So I have to have it all easily portable, and you can do that really quickly with contrast paints because you haven't got to worry so much about having a palette or any of that kind of stuff as well.
Should everyone paint their models? Is it a sin to have unpainted models?
Well, Pete actually had this discussion today, I think, on our Patreon Discord, didn't you, Pete? And you summed it up perfectly. Everybody should be able to hobby in their own way. So if you don't want to paint your models, then don't paint your models. Now, if there's a competition that says you have to have painted models, well, okay, you're going to have to take that on the chin. You're not going to be able to enter that competition. But Underworlds is unique in Games Workshop terms in that they made all the models, all the different war bands are different coloured plastic, so that you don't have to paint them. There is no obligation, and I'm pretty sure none of the Grand Clashes is there any obligation to paint. So if you've just bought the box, or you just don't want to paint them, and you could just turn up with the base models, no paint on them at all, and just play. As long as your models are just easily distinguishable from your opponent. So if you're both playing with plain blue plastic Stormcast, then you might need to make some sort of identifier on them. But other than that, there's no obligation to paint, and I don't really think there should be. I can see why people want to play. I can see why people who play a lot, put a lot of effort into painting their models, might be a little bit aggrieved if their opponent is just playing a wall of grey plastic on a bigger game. But that's their prerogative. For whatever reason, they've invested the money in the miniatures. If they don't want to paint them, they shouldn't have to. That's my feeling on it anyway.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that that's the good thing about Underworlds is that you don't have to paint the models. I think they have even had Grand Clash winners who didn't have painted models.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? That caused a right stink by a fairly small group of people, but there were people who were really uppity about it, especially because it was taking place at Warhammer World,
the mecca of Games Workshop.
Yeah, and they were like, how can they allow them to have it? But that really isn't the point of the game.
I wonder if that's what has maybe helped the community that we have, because it's not that serious. Although, to be honest, people could go to Warhammer or 40k tournaments and stuff like that, and you only have to have 3 basic colours on them. So it wouldn't take much if you want to get to that standard. But you don't have to do that at all with Underworld. You can just literally take the models off their sprue, stick them on the base, and they're push fit as well, so you don't even need glue for that kind of thing. Yep. You can just quickly put them together. The main thing that matters is that you've got the right models, the right boards and the right cards, and you can play. And whilst I'd love my models to look like Sir Astros or Duncan Rhodeses or something like that, I'm never going to do that, and I haven't got the time to do that. So I can make mine look okay. I can make them look that I'm happy with. And yeah, I think games do look better with painted models. I mean, who amongst us hasn't, when you've been in the hobby, looked in a Games Workshop magazine or a similar gaming magazine and seen those full table spreads with all of the models on it? It just looks fantastic. But if you can't do that, then don't do that. And I think that's why we've built up the small following that we have, in that we encourage that kind of thing. If you want to paint like that, we have some awesome painters that we chat with.
Really good, our patrons.
Some of them are absolutely fantastic. But equally, there are others amongst us who are like, I can't bother to paint. And hobby. How you want a hobby?
Sorry, I assume Games Workshop drive was to try and pull in the X-Wing players and the Magic the Gathering players who can effectively just pick up a Mr. Pack or whatever of the game and just play it. I assume their reason for saying you don't have to paint it so that they could draw those players in. But I think it's worked, but I think what's really nice about Underworlds is because it's a very, very small model count, that actually I think most people who do play have had a go at some point or other at throwing some paint on their figures. Because if you've only got 3 or 4 models to paint, it isn't anywhere near as daunting as if you've got a whole army of Stormcast or goblins to paint.
I've recently started trying to paint again, and I used to do oil painting when I was younger. I thought, so this will be the same. It's absolutely not.
There's more than one side.
There is more.
But it's funny though, because I'm utterly incompetent at 2-dimensional painting and drawing. Utterly awful. And I wouldn't say I was brilliant at miniature painting, but you can get, with some fairly simple techniques, you can get, especially with the contrast paint, you can get reasonable results.
Yeah, also I'm painting things like D&D models and stuff like that, and occasionally you get a board game that has a really nice mini in it. You think, do you know what? Have a bash at that.
Stab at that one.
Ruin that one.
Well, there's a nice thick coat that obscures all the details. I can do that.
Need to get yourself some contrast paints.
Yeah, definitely. I would. Anybody who used to paint, I would definitely recommend doing something like that. They are fantastic.
So shall we try and do a top 5?
Yeah.
For all of the latest game reviews and news, make sure that you subscribe to Tabletop Gaming Magazine. Go to www.tabletopgaming.co.uk for our digital edition and paper magazine offers.
So I think we want to do the top 5 games to play if you don't have time to play Warhammer.
I guess I could put one in there.
Yeah.
And Robin probably won't agree with this one. And it's close as well, but I would put Blood Bowl in there because when you know what you're doing with Blood Bowl, you can play a game in about an hour and a half. But that's still a fairly long game in the grand scheme of things. So
yeah, are the 5 games not including Warhammer Underworlds? Because we would obviously include that if we we're going to say one, because that's our favourite game.
I mean, maybe not including Warhammer Underworlds.
Okay,
I mean, we're assuming that's position 0 or something.
Yeah, okay.
Right at the top.
So I would say Martin Wallace's Wildlands is a cracking little game. It's really fun, and it's got a few miniatures, and it's got it's actually a very different game, 2-player to 4-player, but it's a good game.
Yeah, we played a game of that on our channel, didn't we? And yeah, that's a really funky little game. Rules are really simple for it. There's no dice rolling at all, is there? I don't remember.
No dice rolling. It's all done on cards.
Just all cards.
There's a Judge Dredd version just about to come out, or has come out. I'd like to get my hands on that. And they're bringing out the Dark Judges, Pete. I know you like the Dark Judges.
Yeah. In fact, it wasn't just Judge Dredd, was it? I think it was like a 2000 AD version, because I'm sure it had like Slain and stuff like that in it as well.
It does, yeah. We've got a review of the those judges that you're talking about coming in next issue, actually.
I'm a subscriber, so I shall look forward to that.
That's very exciting. Sorry, lost all professionalism there. Right. Someone's read a magazine, excellent.
Cool. I pored over mine this weekend. I had about an hour where the children were presumably playing the Xbox or something, and everybody left me alone. So I sat down with my Tabletop Gaming Magazine and read it cover to cover. It was delightful.
It was a good issue, actually. It was a very good issue.
It was.
Yeah, it was. That was number 2. That was Wildlands.
Well, Pete and I are about to play Necromunda. We haven't played very many games of it yet, but I would put that up there because it's a kind of hits the sweet spot for me that it's not too big. The gangs of that are about 10 models, and there's a bit of narrative evolution in that, which appeals to me. But I found with the other Games Workshop skirmish games, they very, very quickly bolt on all the other bits of their system. So they had Kilte, which really appealed to me. But then before you knew it, they'd basically added just about everything on, apart from like huge vehicles. And for us, we didn't have the time to. We didn't have big collections, so we couldn't play it. Where in Necromunda, you pretty much just buy your gang, maybe a couple of extra bits, but you then can play as many games as you like. So Necromunda definitely appeals to me, more so than Blood Bowl, Pete.
What is the argument about Blood Bowl here?
We played one game once because I think shortly after we started the channel, Robin got a copy of Blood Bowl, the third edition or fourth edition, I can't remember which one. I think it was fourth edition, and it was like the big unveiling after it had been out of print for years and years. And obviously Blood Bowl was one of the first big games I got into back in like 93 when I was just 13 years old. And so I was incredibly excited by it. The models looked awesome and all that kind of stuff. And we pulled the models together when we painted them and we played a game. And it took us, I think, 5 hours. I think we played the first half and it took us about 2 odd hours, and then we played the second half and it took 2.5 hours. And I think because it's one of those games that if you play it a lot, you quickly learn the basics. so you know what to do, and it becomes a bit like chess. You move models without really having to think too much about it. But if you've never played it before, to suddenly have these 12 models and each one can do these a plethora of things, and there's all these dice rolls that have all these modifiers, it can very quickly get quite confusing.
I mean, I find that is an issue generally with games. I love to play games and I love to play different games, but I'm finding as I get older in particular, I really have to focus on one or two games, because although I'd love to, because I do review games for Geek Dad, I love to play all these amazing games that people sort of semi-offer, would you like to review it? But actually, there isn't the time to get into the nitty-gritty to enjoy it. But so Blood Bowl, we've only played once and I didn't really like it, but I have to say I have never liked it. So Pete said he really enjoyed it. But is this the 4th edition?
I think it's the 4th iteration of it.
Well, and I just have never got into it. So I remember we had the original, my friends and I, we had the original cardboard standee version. So it probably came out in the mid 80s and I didn't like that. And then my friend got the one with the polystyrene board and I didn't like that. I think it's partly because it's based on American football, which I just don't really understand. But I like to tease Pete about it, really, because he'd be desperate to play. If we could devote the channel to Blood Bowl, he totally would. But it's just it leaves me cold, unfortunately.
Can't get the stuff.
Another game I would suggest, though, but not competitively, because I've heard the competitive scene is cutthroat, but X-Wing, for that pure visual and Star Wars. It's impossible not to quote the film or what have you when you're playing it. It's just really good fun if you're playing it casually. It's quick and easy. The movement counter, the movement, what they're called, templates and things are just really fun. Really fun. The only problem with it is I don't recommend it for children, because position of the models is really important, and children knock them over every 2 seconds. So you can't. Even my older children, they'll just lean over to get something, just scatter the X-wings all over the place.
Or the direction they're facing as well really matters.
My oldest, I could actually believe that's part of his tactic, just to put it back in a slightly different place. But all that's really important. But it's a great little game, and I say it's very cinematic and thematic. So that's 4 we're up to now, isn't it? Or is that 5?
I think that's 4. Yeah, so that cinematic play thing, that's quite. I guess that's like a theme for all these games, isn't it? You want like really quick,
yes,
and then like meaningful explosive action, I guess is what it is.
I think all these things are a bit like trying to build. It's almost a bit like any of these games. You're trying to sort of create a movie or a film or something in your head. You're picturing the cinematics of this stuff going on, and if it's in deep space, then obviously there's ships flying around exploding everywhere. If it's something like Necromunda or some more space age based thing, you're it's a bit like you're reimagining Terminator or something like that, and all of those sort of aspects sort of feed into this
absolutely. I love
make believe world.
I haven't played it that much, but my dad was really into he was really into Napoleonic warfare, so he had loads of Napoleonic figures, but I never really got to see those. But he was really into World War One and World War Two aeroplanes, and I played once or twice with him. Wings of War was it called, which I think X-Wing might have even been based on, which was the little it had little Scott with camels and little Messerschmitts, depending on whether you're playing World War One or World War Two, and Wings of Glory. I can't quite remember what it's called.
Yeah,
Wings of Glory. Yeah, sorry. And that, I mean, X-Wing is very like that, but that again, it was cinematically in a totally different way. But you could totally hear the put 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 of the engines and you were trying to bank around corners and things, and that is again, it's that kind of visual experience, I suppose, when playing, which I need more now. When I was younger, I probably wouldn't have nothing more than to sit with my friends for 8 hours and play Twilight Imperium. But now that just leaves me cold at the thought of doing that. I need to take quick and more visual, which is probably why I've got Blood Red Skies. But my computer here is resting on Blood Red Skies. Nobody can see it, obviously, but I bought it, but again, it's one of those things I haven't got time to play it. My children roll their eyes at me when I suggest we play these games. So tonight, just before coming on, I was looking at one of our patrons, who's a brilliant painter. He painted some Necromunda stuff, and my son went, "Oh wow, that's exquisite, that's amazing!" And I said, "Oh, well, I've got this game. Do you want to play it?" No.
Unfortunately, the minute anybody's dad starts playing something, it stops being cool.
Yeah,
it's not cool anymore. So it doesn't matter. My son has a friend, and his friend's dad is fairly famous. You would have seen him on TV, and I'm not going to drop names. But we went to. Thank God, no. and we went to a local theatre nearby, and there was a picture of his dad on the wall with all these other people. He's like, "Why is his dad there?" Like, because he's famous, and they just didn't, because obviously dad's famous. Like, oh god, dad's on telly again. It's so dull. It's like, it's not cool. The minute your dad does that, it's not cool.
A bit off topic now, but did you see Hugh Jackman's interview with James Corden?
Yeah, it's like that.
His teenage son appeared in the background. He's like, "Oh, Dad." It's just hilarious.
Dad, I want to go on the computer. Yeah. Stop interviewing people on telly.
Anyway, we digress.
Well, I think Sandy Totsvig used to tell a story about, because her dad was a newsreader in Denmark, and she said she took a very long time to realise that not everyone's father went on the television to tell them the news at 6 o'clock or whatever it was, you know.
But what does everybody else's dad do?
I mean,
what do they do?
We have this running theme actually in this podcast series actually, which is the gaming family and how difficult it is. Do you have any wisdom to pass on?
I've come to terms. I've made my peace with the fact that my family aren't gamers, and I think especially with the lockdown, there's a lot of people at the minute posting on Facebook and stuff like that saying, "I've managed to convince the wife to play Warhammer," or "We're going to play our first ever game of 40k," or, you know, "The wife's agreed to paint some models. I'm really excited." And I've kind of got to the point now where I like the fact that it's just mine, that I don't have to play with the wife or the kids, and that I can do my own thing. And when I'm playing against Robin or whoever else, I can be quite cutthroat and merciless, and I don't have to then apologise afterwards and offer to, you know, make a cup of tea to make up for the horrible trick that I've just pulled or whatever. So I quite like that it's my thing and I don't have to share it.
Yeah, I'm not quite there with that here. I've given up on my wife. She'll play Codenames. She loves Codenames, mainly because she's brilliant at it. The kids, I keep trying to get into games. I think you have to aim. You have to kind of let them lead, because if you, like Pete says, as soon as they get a sense that you want them to play it, then they kind of they shut off. But the hardest thing is, because mine are 7, 11 and 14. Trying to find something that they all want to play at any one time is the tricky bit. I haven't really solved that. The best way is to occupy one of them to do something else, and then to play with the two of them. But we've been playing the Pathfinder adventure card game, which I bought years ago. But the two older ones are absolutely loving it at the moment. We're playing that every day after school inverted commas. We break that out for sort of 45 minutes and play around, and they're really enjoying that. But it's just kind of, I try and keep it quick. So I'm quite enjoying roll and write type games, because everybody kind of does their own thing, and they're not too competitive, and you only find out that you've been smashed right at the end, in which case it's kind of okay. You haven't got that feeling of knowing. There's nothing worse in a game when you know you're behind, especially if you're playing with family. Yeah. And for the boys, they know they're behind. They know they can't catch up. It just gets, it's going to get out of hand then. Whereas roll and write, it's right at the edge. It's like, oh well, I got 432 and you've only got 20, but it's all right because the game's finished. But I've noticed interesting coping mechanisms. My middle one, he's always beaten by his big brother. He will just play the most ridiculous tactics and enjoy it. Just love it. He almost like play what do they call it, interference almost, and just love that. And it drives my oldest insane, because she's like, "You're not playing properly."
Yeah,
I can't plan anything because you're not doing what you're meant to do, which is hilarious.
I appreciate that approach to the game sometimes. I think some people think it's like bad faith or something, but it's not really. No, you're just using what's in front of you to to have fun with the people around you. You know, even if it's a valid
tactic as well. Really, I mean, if you don't know what you're going to do, then your opponent's got no hope of guessing what you're doing next. So what better way of countering someone's tactics?
But also, you get to be a kingmaker sometimes, which can feel quite good.
Yeah.
Do we need a fifth game?
I think we kind of do, but I think Robin kind of touched on it actually, which was the Pathfinder one, which is which is actually, we played that for a while in our we had a D&D group for years and years and years and years, and some of us, because some moved up north, so we couldn't meet as regularly, and we sort of picked that up as a good alternative to just actual role play. You don't have to maybe quite put as much into it as regular role play, but there's still an element of it in there, and there's a lot of decision making and team play and stuff like that. But that was quite a good game.
There's no miniatures, but it is good fun. So I'm really enjoying it with the kids. I don't think they're making it anymore. I think they've done 4 seasons maybe, but it is good fun. I think it's more of a casual thing, although the biggest time consuming thing is kind of learning how to set it up. Once you've got that, it's all right. So in some ways it's good if you can play it over repeated evenings, because it becomes very second nature to set it up. But it is good fun, and it's great in these circumstances because we can play every evening.
That's great. Cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for coming on and enlightening me about the world of competitive miniatures games.
The ultimate competitive miniatures game.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yes. It's the ultimately competitive miniatures game. Sorry, yes. Where can people find you and all that sort of thing?
Okay, we're just stuck in my house at the moment. No.
Yes, and your address, your postcode is.
Yeah. So we're on YouTube as Agents of Sigmar, and we do have a Patreon as well. If you do enjoy what you find on YouTube, you can come and join us on Patreon, which is you get extra games and some behind the scenes chat and things, which is really good fun. I do a few reviews on Geek Dad, but we're mainly on Agents of Sigmar playing Warhammer Underworlds, and once lockdown is finished, we'll be playing Necromunda 2. Or not Necromunda 2, but Necromunda as well.
Yeah, I think
sequel finally.
We've done it long enough now that we can. If you Google Agents of Sigmar, you will get us in the first 10 responses, which I'm quite happy with. So yeah, you will be able to find us very easily online.
We are on Facebook as well, so you can find us on there, and Twitter and Instagram, although they're a little bit less travelled than Facebook. But what we do try and pride ourselves on is if you do have a question about the game or anything really, we'll do our best to answer it. So just to try and keep that community going.
Yeah. Where's the best place for people to sort of meet your community if they just wanted to sort of go see what the people are like, see if they really are as friendly as you say?
I think.
Go on, Pete.
I was going to say I think that the main places where people sort of congregate and chat, there's Discord. I don't know if people haven't heard Discord. It's just like an online chat platform. There is a Discord for Warhammer Underworlds. It's an unofficial one. There's also a couple of unofficial Facebook pages as well for Underworlds, and they're private pages, so you do have to join them, but there's nothing scary in that. And there's generally a lot of friendly people all chatting about Underworlds in both of those places, and
a lot of talk of what tournaments and things are around, because the best place to meet new players is if you haven't got a local game club, it is to go along to a tournament. And there's a lot of shops run them, and they can sometimes even only have 4 people in them. But if you're not playing with anybody else, that's 4 more people than you were playing with beforehand. So you can play. They're not too serious, and they're good fun. And again, there's quite a few. We're members of the London one. There's quite a few regional Facebook pages for games as well. So I guess if you can find whatever your regional Facebook page is, then that's probably worth joining too.
Yeah.
And you might end up marrying the person afterwards anyway.
It's possible, although I don't play. As I said, I don't play games with her, so.
So you'd have to take a hit for that, I suppose. Yes.
She has played the odd game of D&D, but she's never played anything with tabletop miniatures.
Excellent.
That's the line drawn.
Yeah, just get a withering stare.
As soon as the models come out, nope.
One of her friends calls it hobbiting. So she's this phrase, the verb to hobbit. So if I'm busy one weekend, her friends say, "Oh, is he hobbiting this weekend?"
That's very good. I like that.
Quite, it's better than my mother-in-law will call it. Are you gaming with your soldiers? Not soldiers.
My mum used to call them little men.
Yeah, little men.
Are you playing with your little men this weekend?
Mum, they look cool.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks, guys.
No problem at all.
Thanks for listening. Our theme music is by Body in the Thames, which you can find at bodyinthethames.bandcamp.com. You can find us on tabletopgaming.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter at tabletopmag, on Facebook at Tabletop Gaming Magazine, on Instagram at tabletop_gaming_magazine, and we've just launched a Twitch channel. You can find us there on twitch.tv/tabletopgamingmag. If you like the show, recommend it to a friend, rate us in the iTunes store, or subscribe to the magazine, which you can do on our website.